D&D is not a trading game. It's for combat, really, and roleplay and puzzle solving. And generally speaking, trading games require a lot more mathematics than something like D&D does. And that's saying something. But if we were to create a game in which a group of players wanted to run a merchant empire, in which they started their own chain of gladiatorial rings, in which they worked as smugglers within a larger thieves guild, then what do you, as the DM, the person running this world, need to be aware of? What kind of niggling little details will cause this tapestry of commerce to unravel? Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and welcome back to the map making challenge. This Mapvember for the Red Quills, I am creating a new map every day for 30 days to celebrate my 30th birthday. And today, we are 1/10 of the way through. Now, it's been an absolute pleasure so far. As you can see, I'm beginning my own collection of the maps on my wall here. I intend to show them off as we go through. But this, the 10th map, is the one that I wanted to talk about, having a specific map for a specific purpose, rather than maps of individual sites. Yesterday I talked about having ancient maps which are also prophecies, and today I'm doing a similar thing, but this one is for a different kind of campaign, one in which your players want to dominate the world commercially, rather than just as heroes of yore. Now, I did, in the very, very early days of this channel, make a trade map video, which I have since taken down because the quality left a lot to be desired. And I have since gotten much better at that. And that is, as I'm sure you can tell, saying something. So today I'm going to revisit a few of the principles that I talked about there. I have mentioned them in other videos since then, but you have all asked, so I'm going to come back to it here. Now, for those of you who also watched yesterday and saw the challenge there, I would love to hear your ideas, the things that you put on your commercial maps as well. So you can stick them in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know your support so we can get going with the rest of this series. But for now, let us turn our attention to this map of Eglarond's trading empire. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm less focusing on the materials and creating a map that is going to be aesthetically pleasing, and I'm much more focused on making a map that is functional, that is usable for the individual, and can be given to the players with a confidence that they would actually be able to navigate the world and use the details within it for their benefit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch out a portion of the continent. I've already done the ancient map of Anko, and I mentioned yesterday I haven't done one that is modern of the whole continent yet. I will later on once I've done all of these points. But for now, I'm just going to do a portion of it around the city of Eglarond. You might recognize the name as one that I mentioned in previous maps. It's like my go-to name for a trading empire city-state. I'm going to bring that back here. Now, there is a lot to talk about in creating a map that is going to be useful to a trader, and I'm going to try to tackle all of the individual points as I start sketching this map out. I'm going to use the Fineliner pens to do it. Everything is in the materials list in the description below if you want it. I won't spend too much time talking about that here. But the first thing we want to talk about is what we need geographically. So when we're sketching out the map, what we want to remember is we're going to need the coastlines with the ports highlighted. Any trader worth his salt travels by land as well as by sea. Sea has its benefits because it's much, much faster. But if you sink a ship, you lose the cargo. Whereas if a cart loses its wheel, then you're going to be fine. So be precise about where the harbors and the estuaries and the docking points are. Be more prominent about those than the inland features, because as long as a road is there, they don't need to know where every twist and turn in the road is. They just need to follow it from point A to point B. What you need to mark is the obstacles along the way. Next, if you're doing the sea stuff, think about where the prevailing winds and currents are. I decided not to on this particular map because it was getting crowded already, but if you have one that's more focused on navigation, that's an option for you there as well. Think always about the distances and sailing times. As I've done in previous maps, I'm using the grid here to show the distances between static points. I'm not doing the Portolan and Rose chart again. I want to make it simple to read, and that made it way too complicated when I tried the draft of it. So we're going to be able to maintain an understanding what distance from point A to point B is by using that. But you could also write the distances on individual roads or on individual trading routes by sea if you wanted to do that as well. Think about where the hazards are, like the sandbars, the reefs, the shoals, the sea monsters, the river crossings, the floodplains, the volcanoes, or the, earthquake fissures, things that are naturally occurring but could either delay or disable a caravan. And think about, of course, the major inland trading routes. So moving away from the sea, talk about where the caravan trails are, where the river crossings are, where the bridges or the mountain passes are, useful for overland transport. It is very time consuming to travel overland, but it is in many cases safer than by sea. And then once we move past the geographical details, we can move on to the more economical details. And I'm going to use my red pen here for that as well. I actually found it leaks a little bit more on this thicker watercolor paper. This is the Artliner red that I got. I do love the color of it, but I did find that it really bled on this paper as opposed to the other paper that I use, which I found really interesting. So be aware of that if you have the same tools. So I couldn't do the detail work that I wanted to with the red pen. So as we go through and we start doing the trading details, here's a very brief list of the things that you can add into your own map. For instance, custom stations and where the tariffs are, and you've got different border posts. You want to be able to remember, where those are and your crossings over between different lands. I've marked borders on this map for that reason, and it's not something that I generally do. If you watch this channel, you'll notice I never really do borders because they historically were never really that static until very recently. And so for this map, it's good because it tells us where the currency will be changing or where the goods will be changing or where, tariff points or custom stations will be. But generally speaking, I wouldn't do that too much. Think about commodity icons or notes. So on the larger groups of city-states, for instance, the Iridian Union or the city-states of Soronakos, I have little icons that show what their major exports are. For a trader who's moving from one place to another, you can think, okay, what do they already have that they won't want to buy? And what do they have that they will want to sell to someone else? So you can compare between your two individual points and think about the goods that you're going to be buying at a lower price in one area and selling at a higher price in another area. I just broadly speaking, have a very brief list that gives us an understanding, like ingredients or cloths or weaves, metals, jewelry, wine, glassware, and wood, as well as what I would call the more darker markets, like slaves, beasts, or generally being very unfriendly to outside traders. And by that, I mean they only accept smuggling. So those kinds of icons will allow you to kind of break out what the economy functions on. All economies, all of them will need a certain few staples. They will all need, food, wood, building materials like stone. They will all have those because those are requirements for civilization. What we're talking about here is trading in the luxuries, like jewelry, like fine wine, like, tapestries or metalwork. Those kinds of things are much more valuable and much more useful to transport from one place to another. You do not want to be a stonemason because the amount of weight you have to move is just incomprehensible. Being a jeweler is much more viable. After you've done commodity icons or notes, you can look at, seasonal trade notes or guilds and fair towns or weighing houses, minting towns. Think about where currency gathers. So I have a few icons here that show where fairs are. Specifically, that's where, people will travel to at a certain kind of year to trade goods that are only available at a certain time of year or goods that are only available from different cultures that we don't normally trade with. So I have ones associated with the giants or the dragons or, outside economies. And that's a great way of having goods be available to your players that aren't normally accessible to them, like, coffee or chocolate, that kind of thing. Custom houses and mints are something that you want to keep an eye on as well. It's not going to come up too often for a standard D&D campaign unless you're doing a heist, but if you are dealing with a group of players whose sole goal is to become the richest group of people in the world, then you're going to want to be aware of where money is being made and where gold and silver and copper are being mined. That's something that you want to keep in mind. Then, of course, as well, and I did already mention this, you want to be aware of the politics of it. Where the borders are, where the disputed areas are, what's a safe port versus a hostile port. So in addition to marking down the different borders of the provinces and the areas here, I've also marked down where pirate activity is, where outposts are, and where contested lands are between two warring city-states. So they're absolutely hostile to anyone who goes in them. So traders just avoid them. Pirates as well. It's a good one to mark down for any trader's map. You don't need the exact location. I've just stuck down a few that are gathered around reefs. So reefs are already marked on the map because they're, a geographic hazard for people who are taking ships from one point to another. And that's a logical place for a pirate to rest as well, because it's going to be difficult for the law enforcement to find them and attack them. So in addition to that, I also have what I call the Red Quills dotting system, which is a series of dots that you place under the major towns to show how wide the range of goods that is available for that town is. So for any of the towns that are small, towns or villages, the ones that are marked with my thinnest pen, the 0.05 millimeter, they will only generally have a small market. They don't need to be marked. They have access to common items, and that is it. As we get larger, we get into 2 dots, 3 dots, 4 dots, and 5 dots. That shows the relative rarity of the items that they will come in contact with, whether it's uncommon, rare, very rare, or legendary. I don't actually currently have a 5-dot town on this. I've used it in the past, but that's because for this particular land, I wanted legendary items to be site specific rather than have, a global capital. Because again, this is a collaborative atlas, so I don't want to prescribe anything for the rest of the world. Legendary items tend only to exist in a few places in the world, and I didn't want to take that from anyone else. But that dotting system, I think, is a really good way of focusing your players' attentions on where they can trade for things that they will need. So even if they aren't merchants, a fighter is always going to be on the lookout for a good set of plate armor, which is difficult to get your hands on. Especially when they're looking at enchanted weaponry or armors that aren't, legendary or have, individual enchantments, but do have, a +1 or a +2 or even a +3 bonus. Where will you be able to find a smith of that quality willing to trade those things? That's a great tool to help you figure out where they're going to be headed in order to trade those things, rather than rocking up to the nearest town and, shaking the blacksmiths until something falls out. And that's most of the details that I add into this map. You can add in more as well. I've added notes on this, which are practical notes for the person who's made or using the map. Like, for instance, to note that the Mirese are hostile to all foreign ships and caravans, or to say that the traders of Gore are willing to exchange goods for captives, but the Council of Gore frowns upon it. If you want to trade with them, you have to be a smuggler, pretty much. And so those kinds of notes are going to be helpful for you if you're running a trading-based campaign, but aren't necessarily, going to be the backbone of a standard D&D campaign. Those are just a practical awareness that the world exists outside of a trading map as well. And then we're finished. We have an understanding of what the world looks like through the eyes of a trader. It is viable. It is usable. It shows us what the network of travel is from one town to another. And you can see how much richer it is via sea than via land, because again, it takes much, much longer to travel by land than it does by sea. So a trader will always be looking to travel by water unless it becomes too risky. For instance, in the event of pirates. Now we're coming to the end of this video now. Let me know what you think of these tips and tricks to make your own trading map of the lands in your D&D campaign. I hope that they are useful. Comment below if you find them useful. Again, I can't wait to hear all of your ideas. I can stick them together into a document. I would be keen to do that if we get enough of these ideas together as one. But thank you for joining me, and I know that you are all waiting for the challenge for tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm going to go back into a site-specific one, and I was going to focus entirely on doing traps and what mechanical traps look like. And when I say mechanical traps, I mean that they are physical and they have a physical trigger and a physical effect. So tomorrow's prompt is for the Maw, which is the open jaw of a dead god in which a mad tinkerer has created a series of massive physical mechanical traps. What does that look like for you? How does he use the environment and enhance it to make it even more deadly? I will see you tomorrow for day 11 of the November Map Making Challenge, and until then, happy mapping.